Welcome, everyone. Today is August 29th, 2024. This is the biweekly SIG Instrumentation meeting. It looks like we have one thing on the agenda, which is the custom resource state metrics controller. You want to take this one, Pranchu?
Yeah, I'll just try to share my screen. I'm not sure.
Oh, hold on. I think I might have to make you co-host. Hold on, let me do it. There you go. You're co-host.
Okay. Um, Not sure. Okay. Yeah, I can do that now. Um, sure. Um, can everyone see my screen? My browser pretty much. Okay. Welcome everyone. I wanted to run something by the SIG that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, which is CRD metrics, a controller that aims to replace custom resource state feature set of cube state metrics. The CAP is already up, so if anyone wants to get a deeper insight into what this is, they can take a look. But there's just a couple of things that I wanted to go through just to give everyone a basic idea of what this basically improves and why we need this um, to replace the current disadvantages that CRS kind of poses. So the first thing that arises that Manuel actually asked me was, why do we need a different controller? Why don't just revamp or refactor the current CRS the current CRS the feature set that we have? So that's basically because we there's these native metrics that are currently guarded behind. I think you can see my entire screen, right? Or is it just the okay, just the
Uh,
browser?
yeah, just the browser.
Just
And
the,
then when you do stuff, it gets a
okay,
little wonky.
okay. So yeah, so we have two different sets of metrics in KSM, which is the native metrics and then the CRS metrics that are generated by the user. The difference between both of these, the most prominent difference between both of these is KSM metrics are native, and these are generated from native objects, and these carry some sort of stability with them. It's not, it's not explicit, or it's still, we are still kind of
Yeah, they're statically defined as opposed to being
yeah,
dynamically
we are
generated. Yeah.
still in the way of kind of establishing that metrics pipeline where we have stability with the with the metrics, but native metrics guarantee some sort of stability over CRS metrics, which have no stability whatsoever. But the issue here is in KSM, if there's anything wrong with certain CRS bootstrapping behaviors that happen when we are building KSM, when the binary is running and it's just setting up. So if something's wrong with the CRS feature set, let's say the GVK that's supposed to generate metrics does not exist, it fails. And because of a failure for the CRS feature set, the native metrics um, they get more downtime, which is just not something that should happen because these two should be completely independent of each other. And native metrics should have as much availability as possible because people actually depend on them and these carry a stability with them. However, the CRS metrics, they can, afford to be more unstable. And so what we want to do is take everything out, and essentially these guards that are there in KSM that influence the generation of native metrics, because once that's out, we can actually deploy that without the overhead of CRS metrics. So that would allow folks who basically just want the native metrics and not any custom metrics in their cluster, to just have that without any overhead, without any, um, setup costs or anything like that.
So
That's
I have a question. So are we going to be using Prometheus directly, or are we going to use the custom metrics stuff that we've written for cube state metrics?
so this would generate metrics based on the configuration that you
Yeah.
provide, and then this would be ingested by Prometheus.
Uh,
And is referring to the clients that we use internally.
yeah.
Okay, if we are using the one in CubeState metric that is completely raw, where we just generate bytes, or we are using the one with like the object from client Golang.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
So do you mean Prometheus as a dependency? I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, so essentially, to give you some history, at some point for CubeState metric, like generating the pod metrics took too much time. And so like scraping the metrics endpoint like took maybe 10 seconds or so. So they removed all the fancy stuff from client Golang and just generated bytes for the time series. And that's what we expose instead of having like actual counter object and so on that we could update.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So
the
Anne is
structure
asking, like, do we plan to continue using that optimization that causes some problems, like for various reasons, or are we going back to the normal one?
Yeah, so there's this conformance thing, right, which I have. I've while I was writing this, I think one of the top priorities was conformance with KSM. So the metrics themselves are not structured. Everything is a gauge metric, because gauges are
But that's besides the point. That's like the question is, which client are we using? Are we using the KSM client, or are we using the native Prometheus client?
It's talking about the one with the metric generators.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Like when we use metric generators in KSM, that's because like we remove all the fancy Prometheus logic from the client. Meaning that like if you want to export the data in something else than Proto or just from HTTP, that becomes a problem. And that's what we faced like 6 months ago or 1 year ago. But if you go back to the normal client, you don't have this problem because it's supported anyway.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, okay, so you're giving some arguments for why they should be separated, right? Like, you're saying it avoids basically noisy neighbor problems, right? And gives you some isolation. I'm wondering if there's a different argument here, which is that, like, one, you were making the point about basically static versus dynamic metrics, and KSM has a set of static metrics with stability guarantees. Dynamic metrics, like completely dynamic metrics, might have different properties, and also you might want different configurations, right? Like it's much more configuration based when you have completely dynamic metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if there were like other things, other reasons, right? Like just dynamic versus static is not really an argument. The implications of it is more of an argument, right? Like the
Yeah.
fact that the configuration has to be a lot more complicated, right? Because when you're completely dynamic, you need to be able to express exactly the metric that you want to generate, right? And this is going to be more possibly very complicated because it's CRDs and has arbitrary paths or whatever.
So
And
are you
you
saying
know,
that we should not be using like a Prometheus client for this? Maybe.
No, I'm saying that we should, and that is a benefit of separating the two because we're using this hand-rolled client right now in KSM.
Yeah,
And
and I
then
would
apparently
very
there was
much agree
bugs.
with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and there were bugs in it, right? Is what Damien was saying.
Like not bugs, but there are limitations because like all the things that Client Golden builds, essentially we need to build them ourselves again.
Yeah, we
And
hand-rolled it.
like
Yeah.
I don't see use cases where we would need it at this point because like there wouldn't be as much CRs as you have pods.
Yeah,
I
you're not gonna have the
doubt
churn. You're not
anyone
gonna have the
really
churn.
has
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So you wouldn't face the same performance issue that we faced in KSM. So going back to the normal client sounds like super fair to me. And that would
Yeah.
simplify also like integration with the Kubernetes code base because we could reuse essentially everything and not have to have like our own stability framework and so on, or like stability library. Like we need
You
to have
can't
in
have stability
KSM.
levels with completely dynamic metrics though.
Oh yeah,
You
that's
can't.
true. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
But yeah, that
So
was just an example. Like maybe there will be something else in the future that we could reuse. But in case of KSM, we cannot today.
sorry, I kind of have a, I'm not sure I'm understanding the Prometheus client thing correctly because do we mean ingestion? Because that's the issue that I
no,
remember.
like KSM outputs metrics.
Yeah.
Right. It uses a Prometheus client to output some metrics, right? It internally collects some metric data and then converts it into Prometheus format and then exposes it on an HTTP endpoint.
Yeah, but
right?
yeah, so we don't depend on Prometheus per se.
Yeah,
So
I know. We hand-rolled the Prometheus client is basically what we're saying.
yeah,
And,
the problem.
we're saying that we can use the Prometheus client in CRD metrics as opposed to KSM.
There shouldn't be reasons why we need to remove that dependency in CRD state metric. Whereas like in KSM, we have limitation in terms of performance, but we shouldn't have that with CRD state metric.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you're going to have as much churn with CRDs.
No. Like I think KSM, like I've only seen 2 or 3 use cases like KSM. Like one is advisor, and the other one is something else working with, but like no one in the Prometheus ecosystem has this issue beside us.
So if we want to use Prometheus client here, the metrics should be structured, first of all, I believe. And that would, so currently we have a 3-time faster, it's like a 300% increase over RTD times. The metric stores build in the same time for KSM, KSM CRS and CRD metrics controller. There's really no difference, but when you query for them, this is faster because of some optimizations. But if we make the metrics structured, that would also allow us to have these, the protobuf support that we don't have in KSM currently. But yeah, so the raw representation that's kind of plugged at the core level in CRS is the same with this as well, because that's the I think that's the speed versus structural trade-off that we make, where if the metrics are structured, then you would need kind of wait for them to be marshaled into the raw format every time. So I think that was the choice that KSM also made. And for conformance, for the same expectations, from the users, that's the same choice that we have made in the controller as well.
I mean, like conformance is just adhering to Prometheus format. I mean, it's basically just outputting a Prometheus. I don't understand this conformance thing.
Yeah, so it's we would be able to. So KSM is not able to output in protobuf format currently because the metrics are not good.
But that's something we don't want to be conformant with, right? That's a negative.
Yeah. So if we don't want to do that, I think we don't need Prometheus client because currently we just do that.
We want to do that, right? We want protobuf, right? That is a good thing.
But we would sacrifice speed for that. So we would be slower.
Yeah. But that's what Damien was just saying, right? The optimizations are not really necessary for CRDs because we don't have the high volume of pod churn that we have in KSM. That was the reason for the performance optimizations in the first place. CRDs don't churn as much as pods.
Yeah, it's not that it would be a bad thing to remove it, but like we don't need it, and that's a pain to maintain compared to just using the normal client.
Yeah, I mean,
and the normal client allows us to do more things as well. Like,
exactly, it's better. It's just better, but it could be a large refactoring. I don't know how invasive that would be.
Just to add on here, the cardinality could be significantly more because so we have had demands in CRS, in KSM, where the users want, so KSM still has problems with unmarshalling maps and composite data structures, which is something CRD metrics improves upon, where if you, let's say if you specify a map, if you specify just the spec, for example, for the particular resource, it would go over the non-composite value fields in that particular object, and it would generate keys and values for it. Unlike KSM, which would just um, paste in a FMT sprintf representation. So CRDs could possibly have a much larger metric volume than I would say KSM does. The native metrics does, at least. So structuring that and then unmarshalling that could slow us down by a lot. We could probably have that behind a flag, but yeah, that's the volume is going to be a lot, I think.
Yeah, the volume is going to be high, but that's going to be a problem with both clients, I feel like. It's completely unbounded is the problem. So it doesn't really matter if it's like, 300% faster. If it's completely unbounded, you could basically explode no matter what.
Yeah, so for that, we have different resolvers. I was actually, so that was we have extensible resolvers where you can, so currently there's two different types of resolvers. You can specify an unstructured resolver, which is the default one, where you can, so this would basically fall back to the unstructured API, and that would resolve the metadata.name or whatever is in the unstructured field. It's just a very simple way of finding out a non-composite field and then generating metrics from that for just simple applications. But we also have cell resolver, where you can have you can do whatever cell expressions are capable of. But at the same time, we do have the this bonus that comes from cell, which is also implemented in the controller, of cost estimation and cost capping. So if somebody specifies a bunch of functions in the same expressions and the calculation amounts to a cell cost greater than what we have specified. So currently what we have specified is the same as what API server does. But yeah, if it goes beyond that, then we just cut it off entirely. So that's the cardinality control that we have currently, as opposed to CRS. Yeah, Catherine, you have any question?
Yeah, I have a general concern about the cell. Because before in the KSM, we have grammar check. For example, every time when we write a function, we can see how many field does this deployment has. But if we cell, it's all like a string. So if even I write something wrong here, for example, o.metadata, it's no syntax autocomplete and check. So I think it will make maintenance harder. Even we have bug in the definition, it's very hard for users to figure out. But currently, if we use the Golang structure, we can dot, so get everything.
So yeah, if there's anything wrong with the config, then the controller would not crash the metric generation it's just that the metric for that particular metric family, that particular metric in that metric family will not be generated, but we would still get logs for it. And we can also emit events if that's more. But yeah, in KSM, if there's something wrong with this, it basically just logs it and moves forward. But yeah, this would log it again and again. And this would also, so there's this additional thing that I mentioned for cell stuff. If your metric is not being generated and your syntax is even correct, then it might be that your expression is really costly. So you would have that. So the logging is all contextual. There's no, unstructured logging or anything like that. We have everything. So all the cell metrics have an assigned cost related to them. So even if you enable more verbose level, you would see the cost for every single metric that's being generated in the logs.
Yeah, but for KSM, it will fail in the build compiling stage. But for this one, it will fail in the runtime. For example, I write something wrong. It should be metadata, but I write some metadata too. So when it can compile, yeah.
So the goal is not to crash, basically. So because this is a reconciliation kind of thing that's going on, the ideology of the whole controller lifecycle, we try to not panic as much as possible. But yeah, the user would be made aware if we want. So there's, I think we could include metrics. There's an issue in KSM for this as well, where we could include metrics for everything that has that's not generated. We already have metrics in the controller for the number of times, or how much did the request took in flight. So even if the requests are taking more time than your SLO, let's say, you would be notified using the telemetry endpoint. So we have that, but we could definitely, this is I think a nice recommendation, and we can have metrics for any metric that, fails generation. So we can monitor if, if that particular metric failed generation, we could have that as a label key, label value, sorry. So yeah, Damien, go ahead.
We might be able even to, like, since it's a CRD, we could reuse some admission webhooks in order to check the validity of the config, in the sense that we could require that the CRD exists before the config is updated, so that there is a schema through which we could compare the cell configuration, and then we can verify that it makes sense or not. I don't know how feasible that would be, but maybe there is something at the admission level that we could do.
So all the resolvers implement a single interface, which kind of just requires them to implement the parsing and the, I think, the building logic. So we could add a behavior for a fail safe kind of thing, where if the object, so if this object does not exist, then no metric will be generated. Same as KSM. So if there's something wrong with it, it would just output the header for it, but not the metric. The same, the conformance thing that happens in KSM. It's, I've really tried to make it as much possible as, the output as much similar to as KSM, and these behaviors. But yeah.
I mean, we can just continue this discussion in the CAP, but I think, like, there is a lot of topic that we could, like, still need to discuss and try to find a path that would be fine with everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the CAP is ready for review, right?
Yeah, the CAP targets alpha, and if the current, implementation is not up to that alpha mark, we can definitely talk over the KEP and just formulate a set of goals, and I can implement them in the controller.
And did you lead opt-in the KEP or not? Because I don't know if we need to lead opt-in it or
Not yet.
if we don't.
And
do you know if it needs to be tracked or not? Because I could lead opt-in it, but
I could, yeah, I'll do it. Give me a second.
okay, sounds good. Because I have no clue, like, if we need to track these stuff since they are in sub-projects or not.
I mean, we still want the PRR review. We're gonna need it, and it needs to be.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I've assigned John Bellamaric, but I'm not sure if he has the bandwidth.
They don't do PRR reviews until way later, so it should be fine.
Yeah, none of the people that you will assign will have the bandwidth, but all of them are super busy. But that's fine.
Yeah, I'll ping John once it gets closer to KEP review time.
Yeah, usually like you have a timeline that is like PR review, and that's when you need to be careful and start pinging people.
All right, we ran out of time, but Catherine,
we can continue this discussion on the KEP, right?
Yeah, sure, we can do that. Okay, yeah, cool. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and yeah, see you in next week for triage.
Yeah, see you next week. Bye.
Bye.